Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. This time we are going to be talking about Heroes of Might and Magic 1, 2, and 3. I'm not talking about the rest of the series because I don't really have any good memories of playing it. So we are going to start off with the first one, which obviously makes a lot of sense. This is such a great game still. Its graphics aren't going to look as good as the second or the third, which, fair enough, but this game was so much fun to play back when I was a kid. How I found this game and how I found this series it's a little weird, but it still kind of matches up with how at least a lot of people discovered games back in the day. You heard it from someone else. And in this case, I heard it from my sister's boyfriend at the time. He had a laptop, which was it was a pretty big deal back in like 95, and he had this game on it. I had never heard of it before, never played it before. I didn't have a magazine that really covered PC games, so I wasn't subscribed to a magazine that covered PC games. So I didn't know anything about what was coming out for any real computer at the time. And I don't know what it was, but I sat down and I started playing this and, just tried to figure out how the game worked and everything. And I just kind of got hooked on it. I remember sitting there and playing it for just hours on end. It was one of those experiences where you sit down at 6 o'clock at night, you start playing it, you get really into the game, and you look down at the clock and it's like 10:30 at night, and you wonder where those 4 hours went. And it doesn't feel like you spent 4 hours playing it, but hey, you did. And it was just so much fun. I remember trying to find this game at like a Best Buy or something like that. And we ended up finding, not this one, but we ended up finding the second one, which was very much like this, obviously, but there was a little bit of weirdness to it that I'll get into in just a little bit. So I'll just kind of cover this part really quick. There's a actual story and a campaign in each of the Heroes of Might and Magic. I never really cared about it, and very rarely played the campaign because it just wasn't really that important to me. I always just like going through all the different scenarios, playing the different maps, messing around with the different with the different characters that you can play as. Sorry, my mind kind of went blank there for a second. So in this first game, they kind of kept it simple. You only have 4 different classes that you can play as: Warlock, Barbarian, Knight, and Sorceress. Each of them have their own unique characters and everything. It's really cool, especially when you go into the castle to start building the different buildings. They all look different. They all look really awesome, especially here where it's much more cartoonish and whatnot. It just looks like a lot of fun to play, at least for me, and it really is. I do remember getting the second game, and I showed it to my sister's boyfriend at the time, and he was talking about the instruction manual that we had, and he's like, "Well, the first game when I got that one, there was like a whole novel explaining the lore and everything." And that's one of the things that I kind of miss about old video games, is they would give you this, oh gosh, it felt like just this huge backstory for everything. I don't think every game did that, but a lot of the games that I played did that. And with Heroes of Might and Magic, it detailed everything, like what was going on in the game's world at the time, why these four different civilizations were fighting, and that was probably really cool. I never got that manual, so I didn't really get all of that stuff. I just had the game. And at the time, I didn't care enough about, what the backstory for any of these people were, or anything like that. I would end up getting some of it when I went into the second game, because they gave you the little introduction. Here, you don't really get that. There aren't really cutscenes in this, which is kind of a shame, but I guess I kind of understand why they did it. Most of the information that happens in between scenarios is just given to you in text, and you kind of fill in the gaps whenever you can with anything that you would want to fill it in with, instead of just paying attention to the story. I think with this first one, this was the game that I got the farthest into the campaign on, because again, the others, I just didn't care. Here, you can pick any one of the 4 different classes that you want to choose in order to go through the campaign as, but it's the same campaign, basically. And your goal is always the same, just defeat the other 3 people that are there, take over the castles, move on to the next one. It's you trying to create a kingdom, basically. And it's fine for what it is. I mean, it's very easy setup. It's still a lot of fun to play, because you're kind of doing the same thing, just gathering resources, building up the different buildings, hiring characters that respawn every week. It's a lot of fun, and I don't know why it's a lot of fun, but it really is. I think it's because it plays so much like a tactical RPG. I guess this is kind of like a strategy RPG, or whatever the hell they want to define the genre as. So that was the first game, and it's a lot of fun still. It's not my favorite of the series, though. My favorite will always be the third one, and that's just because it's a lot more complex than the first one, a lot more complex than the second one, and it feels like it expanded on everything that the other 2 games did right, and kind of minimized some of the stuff that I didn't like from them. But we'll get into that one later. Let's move into the second game, and we'll talk a bit about that. So Heroes of Might and Magic 2 is a better game than the first one. They did a lot to kind of beef up the story. They have more cutscenes in it. I think the graphics are a lot better. There are more classes to choose from. Some of the monsters got kind of moved around a little bit. They introduced some new classes. They kind of made the monsters different. They introduced a bunch of new ones. They just did a much better job with this one than they did with the first game. Not to say the first game's bad, I just think this one improved on a lot of what the first game did right. It's a lot of fun to play. So the story in this game builds off the story in the first one. So the first one, you were trying to establish a kingdom, and in this game you play as one of the 2 sons of one of the 2 sons of the knight character from the first game. And yeah, and there's like a dispute over who gets to rule the kingdom, and you have to choose between Archibald and Roland. And that kind of sets the tone for like what side you want to actually play as. I know that sounds kind of stupid, but you choose either between like good or evil, and the monsters are generally set up in that way. So barbarian, necromancer, warlock, those are on one side, and sorceress, wizard, and knight are on the other side. Sorry, I'm kind of like doing this half from memory and half from the notes that I have. So you have 6 classes now. The 4 from the first game are largely the same, but they've kind of added some weird stuff. So the necromancer takes over from where the wizard was. The wizard moves over to like the good side. And I might be missing one character that was in there, because I know like the dragons got split between the 2 sides. Or no, the dragons ended up on the evil side still. and the good side ended up with Titans. So yeah, that was kind of fun. There's just so much shit that you need to keep straight if you want to like really talk about these. And yeah, I'm sorry, I can't keep all of it in my head when going over these 3 games. Because you also have the expansion packs for the second one and for the third one. The third one has way more scenarios and everything, like the actual campaign scenarios. I'll get into that one when I get there because, sorry, I really want to get to the third one, but that one is way more complicated. This one is pretty simple for the most part, and it's still a lot of fun to play, even though it is kind of it's still pretty complex in like the combat and the base building and all that stuff, but the storyline is a little bit simpler than it is with the third game, and it's more complex than the first game. I feel like I'm just kind of talking in circles, so I'll move on to the next thing. So this is the game that Heroes of Might and Magic 2 is the game that I found when I went out looking for the first game. And I mean, that happened. You would end up just buying a sequel and you had no idea of what the first game was. This case was different. I knew about the first game, but still ended up buying the sequel. It was just simpler times back then when you're kind of at the mercy of the retail stores as to what they actually had in stock. I'm kind of glad those days are over, to be perfectly honest. So on top of adding more races, moving the monsters around, they also added in the ability to kind of upgrade your monsters. As you can kind of see from this one, my mage is a different color now, so that obviously means he's stronger. And he's called an archmage instead of just a regular mage. So that's fun. You can't upgrade every monster in this one, which is fine. You don't necessarily need to, and I don't think anybody was really hoping that they would be able to upgrade everything. It's still the same formula as the first one. You wander around gathering resources, build up all of your buildings, and yeah, you wait a week and then you get more monsters for that you can recruit. It's a great formula, and I really love it. And I think the graphics are a lot better. They're a lot more detailed in this one than in the first one. You kind of lose some of that cartoonish nature, at least in the way the monsters look. They don't die in an explosion of blood like they did in the first game. I don't really know how I feel about that, but I guess it's kind of nicer in some ways. It was kind of weird in the first one when you hit them and they just sort of erupt in blood, but, at least I think it was blood. I don't know, it's a fictional world. It could have been anything, I guess. The only thing that I have a problem with in this game and with the first game is they don't give you enough slots in order to actually have all of the monsters that you can recruit in your party at once. So in the first game, I believe you could have... you know what, I'll just throw out a number here. You could have like 5 characters in your party. Or, 6 characters in your party. Let's go with that. And you had 7 monsters that you could recruit. So you had to kind of decide which one that you would leave behind so that you can have your strongest party possible. This is the same thing. Again, I don't exactly remember. So let's go with you have 8 party slots and you have 9 monsters that you can recruit. So it kind of makes it so that one monster group is just kind of SOL and whatnot. You just kind of have to leave them behind. It makes it a little easier so you don't have to recruit everything. You can save a little money on it. But at the same time, it's like, well, then why do I have all of these buildings if I can't take every monster with me? That is really the only thing I don't like about it. Everything else in this game I think is awesome. I really love the second one. It's great. It's, just like the first one is really good. But they are not my favorite in the series. The third one, which we're going to get to in just a few seconds, that's where I think the series peaked, and they either should have kept going with that direction with the third, or just stopped making them all together. Because I really think anything after 3 has just not been that great. Okay, so here's some Might and Magic 3. My favorite game in the series. It's the best one in the series. Rampart is the best class that you can pick. I don't care what anyone else says. Granted, the stronghold and the dungeon and whatnot, those are fun too. And the knights thing, like that one's a lot of fun. The wizard's tower is kind of cool as well. Okay, all of them are really a lot of fun. You can get Inferno. You can play as demons in this. You still have your necropolis, so you can raise an army of the dead. This game is just so much fun. Like, they threw so much stuff into this, gave you so many storylines that you could actually play through. I think it had like 3 expansion packs to it. I could be wrong. It could just be 2, but it feels like there were more than that. This is such a great game. I wish that they had either kept going with this direction and just sort of added one or two things onto it. But, oh man, like after this, at least in my opinion, the series just takes a frickin' nosedive. So this one, you can actually have every monster that you can possibly recruit in your party. So if you have, let's say, the Necropolis, you can have every character from the Necropolis in your party. It's a great idea. There are also more characters in your party than in the other games. I think the graphics in this one are a lot better. The cutscenes are better. Just the entire game, I think, is so much better than the other two. There are so many more scenarios. The maps are bigger. The sprites are more detailed. Everything feels so much better with this game than it does in the other ones. Oh god, they also reworked all the character classes again. So they kind of did a better distribution of the different monsters. They added like the good side, the evil side, and then they added neutral parties as well. And then they also took the elementals that you could recruit from the first 2 games, and they gave that they put the elementals into their own like class as well. It's just so much better than the other 2. Not to say the other 2 are bad games, but this one is just so much more fun. Also, every monster type in this one can be upgraded. That's kind of a bit excessive, but every monster type can be upgraded in this. It's great. There's so many options in this. It's just a lot of fun to play. For the most part, I kind of avoid the campaigns in this one. Not because they're bad or anything like that. It's just I like going to one of the large maps and just playing up against like 7 or 8 different enemies and just having a great time with it, because it's just a lot of fun. Oh, one thing that I need to mention, and this is when we'll just get into some story time and whatnot. This series did something really cool, where its multiplayer it gives you the multiplayer option called Hot Seat. So you can have like 4 or 5 people, actually I think it's up to 8 players, playing on the same map, on the same computer at the same time. Because this is all turn-based, you would just, take turns. You'd have 4 or 5 friends sitting there, you'd take your turn, click end turn, pass it to the next person. It was so much fun to do multiplayer this way, because you didn't need to have a LAN set up or anything like that. You were just there with your friends. You'd all be just ripping on each other. You could make your own agreements between yourselves, like, hey, I won't attack you, and we'll get rid of this guy because he's a jerk. It was just kind of cool to play this way. I know that that's probably never going to come back. But that was one thing that I really loved about this game, is being able to sit down with a bunch of my friends who usually, they didn't always want to play computer games with me. But then when you bring this one up and you explain it to them, they're like, well, that just sounds fun. So yeah, let's do it. And yeah, I had so many great times just playing with my friends and just messing around with these games for just hours on end. This is one of those games that my friend Joey and I would play just all the time. He would come over and we'd spend like 4 or 5 hours just hanging out playing this before one of us had to go back to our house or something like that. Just because that was the way it happened. You had to be home before dinner. It's the way it was back where I lived. So we'd come over after school and we'd just spend hours playing this game. Regardless of whose house it was, somebody would bring snacks over, we'd open up a couple cans of soda, and just have a great time playing this. It was just so much fun. Like, we'd create our own storylines for it. We'd come up with our own maps, our own scenarios. We would install cheats in the game so that we could get through it faster. So when you do the level editor, there's a way that you can set it up for like a reoccurring event. And we would have a reoccurring event where it would just drop like a bunch of money and a bunch of every resource to us. So you didn't have to like go around and try to find all the different mines and whatnot. You could just sit back, build up your army really fast over the course of a few turns, recruit all the characters you want, and you'd be able to just get rid of people pretty fast, or at least as fast as the game would allow. So it was so much fun to set up those stupid scenarios. We would like write our own stories for them, or I would write the story and they would kind of just go along with it and occasionally chime in with something stupid, and I might put it in there, might not, you never know. But yeah, this was a huge part of my childhood, playing through this stuff. I really love these games, at least the first 3, and especially the third one. I played this so much when I was in the Navy as well. And by that time, it was a couple of years old, but I just really love Heroes of Might and Magic 3. So I know I missed out just on a whole bunch of the lore in this game, or in these 3 games. There is so much story that goes into them. There's so much just other stuff that I don't really care about. I really enjoy this series of games, like, a lot. At least the first 3. The 4th game got kind of weird. I tried to play it and just really didn't. It just wasn't clicking. Like, they changed around the art style, they changed around the character classes again, and it just kind of felt weird. Same thing with the 5th. I just couldn't really get into it. I think they made a 6th, but I don't really care about that if they did. I'm just glad that I can come back and always play, especially play 3. God, I love 3 so much. Anyway, guys, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you've ever played Heroes of Might and Magic, what was your favorite one? And yeah, and if you like the content I put out, please consider subscribing. Yeah, it means a lot to me. I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, guys, talk to you all later. Bye.